Welcome everybody to my review of Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. I'm excited to dive into this one as I'm a big fan of the Mad Max universe. I really like those films. So what I'm gonna do is kind of give you a brief synopsis of the film and then give you my thoughts on it. I'll do my best to avoid spoilers, especially the bigger ones, but just fair warning, there's probably going to be spoilers. And I'll try to give you a heads up if I think I'm running into one. So it starts out with young Furiosa in the green place where she's from, and she's picking some fruit. And already we've got some interesting symbolism here. I think this is very much some imagery of like the Garden of Eden, you know, this last little element of paradise on earth. Well, sadly, young Furiosa gets captured and taken away. She's taken away by some bikers, and at their camp we come into contact with this character, Tempest, who is played by Chris Hemsworth. And again, we run into some more symbolism here, and this is what I got out of it. And I don't know if this is what George Miller intended, but he's wearing like this white cloak. So it's like this white hood and white cape. We see the back of him at first, and then he turns around, and it's kind of funny because he has like this kind of serene, regal look on his face, but he's got like this wonky, kind of messed up nose. So pretty funny, but I think the idea behind this, or at least what I took from it, is that he's trying to come off as this like saint-like figure or messianic figure, and he's trying to, you know, control people. And I think that's a way that, you know, people attempt to do that is they take iconography, they take things that people are familiar with, and they project themselves into those things. So I think that's what he's intending to do. Another symbol kind of later on is when his cloak actually gets red. It turns red from like a flare, and he starts calling himself Dementus, or yeah, Dementus the Red, or the Red Dementus, I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting because he seems to be excited about the fact that his cloak has turned red. And I think this is a bit twisted, but if you start to think about things like sacrifice, right? Or the story of the crucifixion, like this going from this purity to death, or this covering of blood, when you talk about sacrifice, this redemption imagery that comes into play, or resurrection, like raising from the dead. There's a lot of elements that go into play with that color and that sequence of events. Now, again, it's not an image of the crucifixion. The point of that being is it's like a twisted view of it. And I think his character knows that, but he's gonna play it up for all it's worth. So again, he's really leaning into this like savior, leader type idea for himself. So after we meet Dementus, we realize that Furiosa's mother has been tracking her this whole time, which I really like. I like stories that have strong family dynamics and relationships. And you think that would be a no-brainer, but it isn't always. Anyway, I like that Furiosa's mother not only tracks her down, but actually rescues her. I think that's fantastic. So they're on the run, they're trying to escape, and in the process, her mother realizes, hey, we're probably not gonna make it, so I'm gonna give you the best shot you have. She sends Furiosa away on a motorcycle, and she has like a sniper rifle, so she tells her like, hey, keep going this way, I'm gonna take him out. If you don't see me in this amount of time, keep going. Well, unfortunately, she gets captured. Now, Furiosa, being young, she kind of realizes her mother's probably captured. She's probably afraid to travel by herself. There's probably a lot of things at play there. All that to say, she goes back to find her mom. Well, this is a really intense moment in the film, and I will say I'm gonna talk a little bit about a spoiler here, especially if you're a viewer that has like, say, a weak stomach, or you're gonna go see it with somebody who has a weak stomach. She comes back to find her mother being tortured. Now, I think the way they filmed it was kind of pushing the edge. It's okay, thank goodness it's not super violent or graphic necessarily. The way they kind of blocked it and hid some things kept it from being that way, which I'm appreciative for. That doesn't change the fact that it's still a very intense scene. It's very emotional, it's very sad. Furiosa sees this happening, and Dementus is super evil and basically makes her watch her mother being tortured, and all he wants to know is where the green place is. And so he's telling her like, you just tell me where it is, this will stop. But that definitely solidifies him as like a very evil person, a very evil character. Moving right along, we realize that Dementus wants to kind of just control anything and everything. He goes with his biker gang out into the wasteland, and they come across Immortan Joe's stronghold. If you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, that's the villain in that film. So we're reintroduced to this character. He thinks that he can take it over, but Immortan Joe quickly shows him, if you try that, that's gonna be real bad news for all of you. You're all gonna die. So Dementis kind of realizes this and is trying to figure out how he can come back around and get control. And what I like is, like, during this time and throughout the whole film, honestly, is Furiosa's always trying to, like, escape. She's always trying to get back to the green place. She's always trying to survive, and I appreciate that resilience about her. That being said, Dementis goes out into the wasteland again, and he takes control of Gastown. So this is a play he makes to try and get control of Immortan Joe's stronghold. It doesn't fully work out for him, but he does gain some control because he barters with Immortan Joe. So Immortan gives him control of Gastown, gives him some supplies, and in exchange for that, he requests Furiosa. So Dementis gives him Furiosa, and if you've seen Fury Road, you understand why. Now, like I said, Furiosa is always trying to survive. Something that is really interesting that she does is she basically doesn't talk. She either tries to hide her voice, or she pretends like she's mute, or she tries to make it difficult to tell that she's a woman so that they won't make her a breeder. So very interesting choices that she makes throughout the course of the film of how to survive and make it through. Now we come into contact with a character named Praetorian Jack, and this is where we see how Furiosa becomes Praetorian in Fury Road. He's the person in charge of Immortan's war rigs and the crews, and he basically trains her up on how to drive the war rigs and everything else. Eventually, Jack comes to realize a little bit of who Furiosa is, and he realizes that she's from a totally different place. Now, it's cool because you don't always run into characters like this in these films, but occasionally we get characters that just aren't completely evil or deranged. You know, obviously we have characters like Max and Furiosa, you know, so there's people that still have a bit of a moral compass, and Jack is kind of one of them. So he wants to help her get back, so he supplies her with weapons and supplies, and breezing along kind of through the mid to the last half of the film here, also trying to not give too much away. But there's a lot of cool action sequences. Dementis still trying to control places, trying to get control of the bullet farm, as well as Immortan Joe's stronghold, things like that. And through the course of this, we see how exactly Furiosa loses her arm, which is pretty intense. And we get to this point where actually Furiosa has Dementis on the run. And that's another thing throughout the film, is she's always looking for an opportunity to kill Dementis for killing her mother. So she's seeking revenge. And we get to this point where she's cornered him and she's making him remember who she is, and he just does not care at all. And he basically tells her, like, you've got to do whatever you can to survive this wasteland. And he's just being rough and telling her, like, you got to do something crazy to feel alive out here. And then in order to feel alive again, he's like, you got to do something crazier than the last time, and you have to keep ramping it up. So he's basically like, I'm not going to apologize for what I did. I'm doing what I have to do to survive. Now, obviously, this is his mindset. That's how he's chosen to live his life, but thus proving again that he is just a horrible person. Now we get to the point of her revenge, and there's multiple kind of myths of like how she kills him, and we get to see those kind of play out, and then we get to see what she says is the story behind how she took him out. And it's, without divulging it, it's pretty wild. When I saw it, I was like, I don't know how to feel about that, but then I kind of thought about it, and the fact that everyone in the wasteland is kind of deranged and trying to survive, and if you grew up in the wasteland and maybe didn't have a formal education and you're just used to insanity, her story might come across as somewhat plausible, maybe. Whatever, anyway, I was like, okay, whatever. And so that's kind of the gist of the film. Now, I wanted to talk about some of the things I really liked about it. So as I mentioned before, I really like Furiosa's resilience. I like that in any character, the willingness to not give up, to always have hope, to keep pressing forward. That's always an interesting thing to me. It's never not going to be interesting. I really like the acting in it. Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth are phenomenal actors. They're always good, in my opinion. They're just really, really good. I really liked Chris Hemsworth as Dementis, and there's a couple reasons for that. The basic reasons of, I like the voice that he did. Like, he already has the accent, but he did a little something to his voice, which I just thought was fun. And it looked like he was having a good time playing the character, and he had a lot of cool physicality and mannerisms, little idiosyncrasies. Like, he just physically, like, fully embodied this character. So that was cool to see him do something like that. And I like the character of Dementis in the fact that he is just a villain. I know I kind of drove that home earlier, but I'm so tired of Hollywood doing two things, really. They've had a ton of anti-heroes lately that I'm tired of that. I'm just tired of, like, these characters that are morally ambiguous, and we're supposed to kind of cheer for them because they somehow stumble upon doing the right thing. Like, it's just, I feel like they've done it too much lately. Those stories can be good, it's just too much. The flip side of that, another trope I just don't like, is this idea of the misunderstood villain. Just stop, okay? Like, oh, like, someone did something bad to them and they're just misunderstood. The only reason they're bad is because someone did something bad to them, and you shouldn't be mad at them for doing bad things. It's not their fault. It's like, stop. This is the difference between a good and a bad person, because bad things happen to good people and bad people. I'm not happy about that or anything, but that's the way it is. That's reality. What makes you a bad person is choosing to still do bad. What makes you a good person is like, oh, you hurt me, but I forgive you. Or you hurt me, I'm gonna do the right thing anyway, because it's the right thing. There's a clear differentiation, okay? Like, listen, it's not that you have to hate bad people. You can love them and you can try and get them to seek to do good, but in a movie context, in a story context, it really helps to have a good character and a bad character, because that's what we understand. And that's the reality of the world. That's the reality of morality. So I like that he's just a bad guy. And what's cool is they gave him depth, and I think this is where people they try to do this, but they go wrong. Is they want to give their villain some depth or something, but they're like, but you have to identify with the villain. It's like, you don't have to completely identify with the villain to like find them interesting or have a moment of compassion towards them. There's several times in the film where he mentions his past life and that he had kids. It's sad to see what he's become in this story. There's a line that he says to Praetorian Jack and Furiosa in a scene that I really like his delivery, because they've teamed up and they're leaning on each other, and he sees the bond between them and he says, stop that. He's like, you're breaking my heart. Now listen, what's great about this is it can come across as mocking, like, oh, you're breaking my heart. And that still works in context. And I think there's even a little tinge of that there. But I think he's being completely honest. I think he's saying like, stop, you're breaking my heart. Which that is a moment of like, again, kind of compassion towards him. It's like he's been through some hell and some rough stuff. And the reason he says that is because he's tried to harden his heart. He doesn't want to remember when he was good, because he wouldn't be able to take it. He wouldn't be able to survive, at least in his mind. So he's decided, I'm gonna commit to evil and be bad and harden my heart. It's like, so stop showing me images of goodness, basically, that there's hope in the world. Like he can't handle that. So again, it solidifies him as a villain. It gives you a villain with depth that you can understand why he makes choices, but at the end of it still say you're wrong and you're evil because you didn't do the right thing. So I appreciate that, and that's how you write a good character, in my opinion, or one of the ways you write a good character. And a couple final thoughts. I think it's just a fun movie. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I liked it as much as Fury Road, but that's okay. I don't think it was like way off strictly. The pacing is a bit different, which again, it doesn't have to be the same as Fury Road, but it's you know, they're kind of unique, which I appreciate. You know, it's not just a copy of Fury Road, but I think I like Fury Road a little more. One of the last things I'll say is I thought the runtime was pretty good, but if it was any longer, it probably would have been too long, and it probably could have been a little shorter. It wasn't, the pacing was pretty good, and again, I thought the story was interesting, so I don't think it was horrible. I think we need to normalize 1.5 hour to 2 hour movies again. There's something about that time frame that I think works really well for feature films. I like long movies too. I like long movies probably more than most, but I think you really need to have a reason for it. Whether that's just you have a bunch of characters or a really good story or something that you're really banking on to make it a long movie. But regardless, I thought that it was a good runtime. It was a fun movie. And what's crazy is the movie's kind of bombing right now. Now, the critics and the audiences are loving it, which makes that surprising. So I'm not exactly sure why it's happening. I've got some theories. The internet has plenty of theories. Who's to say what is the actual reason as to why the movie's kind of bombing right now? And this isn't me trying to like save movie theaters or even save Furiosa for that matter. But I would say if you like going to the theater, if you like visually stunning movies, this is a movie to check out. It's not my favorite, and you know, maybe it's yours. Some people love it, but like whatever the case, I think it'll be a fun experience for you in the theaters. So those are my thoughts on Furiosa. What did you guys think? I'd love to know in the comments. Let's get a conversation going. Why do you think it's bombing? Or do you think it's gonna have a good track record in the long run? Or do you think it's gonna be like a sleeper hit? Do you think it's gonna gain its money back? Whatever, I just love to hear your thoughts. So anyway, thanks for hanging around, guys. As always, I always appreciate your time. I'm Joel White. Please like, share, subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.